Wow. I mean, this is a technology I've never heard of. We speak today to Amy Gaston, who of OhmBody, which has a new approach with almost ear nerve stimulation. Well, it's placed on the ear to deal with menstrual pain and heavy bleeding. And you ask the question, at some point, are we going to have a device on every earlobe, every finger, every body part? But this really sounds like a whole new approach.
Absolutely. And when you think about all of the menstrual habits and guidelines and the interference with people's quality of life and day-to-day productivity that menses can cause, this really could be helpful for so many women who might have undiagnosed endometriosis or heavy bleeding for other reasons. And she mentions a fairly common disease called von Willebrand's disease, where bleeding can be excessive. It's super interesting.
But one of the things I think separates you, and I always comment on this as a physician, is you're not just thinking about this symptom. You're always thinking about it in the context of quality of life, which fortunately for your patients is something you talk about, but it's not common practice from what we hear and from what we see with patients. It's not just the condition, it's all the other things that are affected in your life as a result of the condition.
Absolutely. Not only that, but she really brought to the surface that not everybody has access to lots of medical care. There are medical deserts throughout the country, so that having a really effective and safe device that's purposefully over the counter could be really helpful in these circumstances as well.
So we're 3 weeks in. They launched 3 weeks ago, and it'll be a little bit longer in market by the time this episode drops. But we'll really be watching. This is a really unique approach that is really exciting. So let's take a listen to Amy. I think she'll surprise you.
Welcome to the Business of the V. Hello, friends and colleagues. I'm Dr. Alyssa Dweck.
And I'm Rachel Braun Scherl. Each week, we bring you the most fascinating investors, inventors, entrepreneurs, academics, and healthcare practitioners who are making things happen in women's sexual and reproductive health.
If you are a woman, know a woman, have a business, or care about your V health and wellness, fasten your seatbelts and listen in to another informative and inspiring episode.
We are so excited to have Amy Gaston, who is the VP of Strategic Growth for OhmBody, which is a really, really interesting approach to menstrual pain. And I'm sure you'll give us a much broader and clearer definition. But first, tell us a little bit about you and how you come to be in the device space in women's health.
Yeah, well, Rachel and Alyssa, thank you so much for having me. I'm so honored to sit down with both of you and maybe pick your brains and learn some things as well. So, yeah, I've been with OhmBody since January, so just right at about 5.5, 6 months, and really had the opportunity to step into this role thanks to our lead investors out of our Series A. I was actually their chief of staff for about 14 months. And when our incredible founders, who we'll talk about here in a minute, decided that as three men, they probably shouldn't be mansplaining periods on stages in the space of women's health, and bless them, they're incredible female advocate or women advocates for women. They wanted a woman to sit in the seat. And I was really fortunate to be on the top of mind of some of our investors and our board members who really offered up and said, hey, you should take a look at Amy. Prior to this, I worked in lifestyle branding. So I worked for a small company called Magnolia based in Waco, and ran their experiential marketing to drive foot traffic to Waco, which was really an incredible experience to really see a brand that is very personal to founders, as they are the face and the likeness of the brand itself. But then how do we translate that into an experience that people can own and take away for themselves? And so I did that for 4 years. I really enjoyed that. Prior to that, I worked in college athletics. I have a master's degree from Baylor University in sport management, and worked on the athletic marketing side. So really bringing game days to life, and really creating experiences for fans. I think there's an interesting cross-section of live events that you just can't replicate, right? You can't really predict wins and losses, and what that's going to look like each time. So it was a really curious way to really create an experience that drove people out of their homes where they can drink for free and eat for free and come to a stadium and pay to do that. So that was an incredible time for me to really understand what marketing live events can look like and marketing brands that people feel really tied to. I think Baylor is always an interesting case study. I don't know if you know this, but they run the Baylor line before every football game. So hundreds of freshmen get to run on the football field and create the tunnel that the football team runs through. And then they sit closest to the field, which is unheard of in most universities. But they really understand, I think Baylor's captured this. If we can create fandom early, then they become the alumni that come back and give money and buy tickets. Yeah, the fanatics.
I went to Duke undergrad, so we have the same experience with basketball.
For sure.
So I want to start in a slightly different place because you opened the door. You immediately started with investors and board members, and OhmBody was started as part of a larger organization. So tell us a little bit about Spark Medical. Are they one of the investors? How have you created this, and what has been used, and what funds have invested in you? Or is it, I know there's a lot of innovation money in Texas for entrepreneurs doing interesting things.
Yeah, so that's great. OhmBody is the women's wellness division of Spark Biomedical. So Spark is our parent company, started in 2018 by three gentlemen who, like I said, are just brilliant and incredible. So we kind of have the business end in our CEO, the research and clinical work from our chief science officer, and then our chief technical officer and our research and development. And we do all of that in-house. And so for a company of our size, not very big, maybe like 28 employees, we've hired a few recently.
And that's for Spark or OhmBody?
That's for Spark completely. And so really we kind of function as this entirety of one company, and we have three different divisions. And so in our first division, in the Sparrow line, we have an FDA cleared device that helps individuals who are withdrawing from opioids and to manage that stress. It's also being utilized, in PTSD and stress management. And so there's some interesting things that are in that space that I think will continue to drive innovation and thought and application. And then the second division is 5 leaders, and it's utilizing our technology in the space of traumatic blood loss and bleeding disorders, which is kind of where OhmBody sort of became this its own specialty, right? When a female hematologist went to our 3 founders, again, men, and said, where you should be using this technology is women who bleed every month, and some bleed at significantly higher rates than they should. And all 3 of them were like, oh, that's interesting. Yeah, let's try it. And so
you don't seem to be in a bad mood once a month. I do notice that.
And menstruation affects half the world's population in some way or another, right? And so this idea that we have innovated technology, non-invasive, non-hormonal, zero systemic side effects that can help women through heavy bleeding and painful periods is really this really revolutionary thing, and we can dig more into that. But from a perspective of our funding, as you asked about, we have been really, really fortunate. We closed a Series A, $15 million in May of this year, which in the current economic climate is just actually kind of wild, but I think speaks to the innovation and our founders and the belief that our investors have in the ability for us to truly revolutionize the world and change the world through one therapeutic application after another. We have a plethora of patents, 12 patents actually, to our company, which is really exciting. That helps just protect that technology and protect the innovation that's happening. But that's our actual investment. But from a non-dilutive capital perspective, we have about $26 million in non-dilutive capital from the NIH and DoD. And so this idea that, and they don't just pass that out like candy, right? They have to
certainly
really
not anymore.
No, certainly not. And so they really have to believe in the technology. And I think there's just some incredible applications that are really practical, again, in a space around the neural tourniquet and neurostimulation. Prior to our company. Let's go to
that. I want you and Alyssa to get into the scientific guts of this.
Yes, so many thoughts on my mind. So, literally when I looked up this device, and I would love to get a simple 101, description of actually how it works. I know it's working on the vagus nerve, which you'll get into, but literally I was waiting to see if it was going to vacuum my floor and clean my house, because it literally looks like it manages so many things. And of course, heavy bleeding is on the map big time now in women's health, not only because we have failed to diagnose in a timely fashion an entity called endometriosis for so many women. It takes up to 7 or 8 years for diagnosis to come about. And this is hallmarked by very heavy bleeding and painful bleeding each month.
Yeah.
But also in the perimenopausal population, which of course, menopause and perimenopause are so
Yeah.
top of mind for all of us practitioners right
Yeah.
now in the women's health space. They are suffering with very heavy bleeding, and it's leading
Yeah.
to decreased energy and low iron levels and anemia and this type of thing. And it really interferes with productivity and quality of
Yep.
life,
So,
as well as physical comfort. But when I look on the site, I see bloating and gastric distress, food cravings, tension and anxiety, fatigue and poor concentration, trouble sleeping, everything that's related to the premenstrual time. So
yeah.
take us through how this is working.
Yeah, absolutely. And you hit on all of those things. I am perimenopausal, which is just, and being a woman who didn't menstruate heavily, I didn't start till I was 17. I was a college athlete, so I had like 3 periods a year through my 20s. Hitting perimenopause and suddenly like flooding. I was like, wait, what is happening? Why is this happening? I have extreme fatigue on day one, which is just not my norm. I run at a pretty high
Right.
capacity. And so I personally am like, oh, this is real. And I was asked today, so you believe in your product? I'm like, we believe deeply in this product because I use it and I use it monthly during my menstruation. So yeah, so from OhmBody, yes, there's a lot of things we could cover, but from a high level, OhmBody
Yeah.
does two different things. Through neurostimulation of both your vagus and your trigeminal nerve, and we're targeting those branches auricularly, meaning around the ear. So it's
Mhm.
non-invasive. Traditionally, when you for some of these things, it's pretty invasive, so surgical invasion or like a pretty heavy stimulation. Our stimulation is very low grade, and it's targeting the nerve specifically. Like it's just a light tingling sensation, which is then each woman can kind of change how intense she wants it. But
And describe what it is, where the
yeah,
stimulation is coming through.
yeah. So it's an applicable disposable earpiece that has two nodes. So one that sits in front of your ear and one that sits in the back of your ear. And it sticks to you with medical grade adhesive and has a hydrocolloid underneath. The actual circuits are like printed into the earpiece. So the electric piece is in the earpiece. It comes down and plugs into a cable that sits on a little device. I'm going to show it, and your listeners aren't going to see, but you're going to see it's about this big. It's about half the size of a cell
Yeah.
phone.
Yeah. No, we're actually on YouTube, so
Oh,
I'm
great. So you
hoping
can see
people will
it.
see.
Yeah, it's pretty small here. And so the frequency blends are already set. So we have already set a proprietary blend of how deep and how often those pulses are going through. But the voltage, I know that's a scary word, but how intense you feel it is each woman's decision. So this device will regulate how intense it goes. So from 0 to 4 amps, which is very, very small. A TENS unit starts at 10. A TENS
Yeah.
unit is also targeting your muscles and not your nerves. So this is
Yeah.
a nerve stimulator. And then it also allows you to set a timer. So we recommend a 2 hour every day that you need support to help do the things that we'll talk about here in a second, but for 2 hours. So really easy, very compact. I lift in this. I go to board meetings in this. I go to the grocery store. You don't have to because it's only 2 hours a
Well,
day.
that's what I was going to ask. It sounds like there's a connector. I was going to ask that very thing. Do you do this at night? Because are you going to a board meeting with something on your ear with a cord connected to this, or is it
Yeah.
wireless?
So it is connected. So this version is connected. It is pretty discreet. I mean, the earpiece, once I have my hair down, you can't really tell. And if I wanted to, I could stick it under my shirt and it could be really indiscreet, but we wear all kinds of things on our bodies that are, I mean, I have a Whoop on right now. I have an Apple Watch. So like wearing wearables is a very normal thing, I think, in our society.
But I was going to ask you because,
Yeah.
like, where does it end? How many things can we attach to ourselves? And now we're
Totally.
carrying a box around. So
So
I was going to ask about that.
Yeah.
How do we manage all of these wearables?
yeah, so for me, I wear it in the mornings before I leave the house and I lift in mine. But if I needed extra support, so like in my last cycle, I had played 2 competitive days of tennis prior to my first day of my cycle. So my body was pretty gassed. So I wore it in the morning to prep for a really big meeting with a university that I needed to be on for. But by the time I was leaving there, I was like, oh man, I feel like I need a little more support. So I put it on and went to the grocery store and
Yeah.
just wore it an additional 2 hours. So it's really, again, if as a woman, you're like, hey, I don't actually want to wear this out and about, you don't have to. do
So
laundry,
technically,
do
somebody
groceries.
could do this for their 2 hours for a couple of days of each month when their
Yep,
symptoms are really
when they
notable,
need
and then
support.
put it away
Mhm.
until the next month.
Yeah,
Okay,
so
that's fair.
yeah, I bleed 5 days on average. I use mine 2 days for sure, maybe three if I've had, again, this last cycle, I was coming off a really tough physical weekend of tennis.
Mm.
And so I needed a little extra support. We have individuals who wear it leading up to their period. So their PMS symptoms are their cramping is the worst 2 to 3 days before.
Yeah.
So they wear it there. We have a graphic designer, she wears it on her ear and leaves it there. And then if she needs additional support through the day, she just plugs herself back in. So it's really
Yep.
customizable to that. So let's get to what OhmBody actually does, because we
How
kind
does
of
it
danced
work?
around that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're going to do basically two things. The first thing, through stimulating your vagus nerve, we're actually going to send signals down to your spleen. Your spleen at any given point holds about 20 to 25% of your platelets. Some people 30% of your platelets at any given time. Platelets are designed to help you clot. So if you cut your finger, the reason you don't bleed out is because platelets showed up and did their job, right? They clot, they thrombin, and they keep you from bleeding out. So essentially what we do is that we send signals down at the spleen, and we're able to pre-prime your platelets so that when your body calls them to a point of injury, so in this case, the shedding of your uterine wall, they're going to show up and they're going to clot faster, stronger, and hold longer. We're not causing a clot. We're not throwing clots. We're not making clots. We're just saying, hey, platelets, when the body tells you to show up to do your job, you're going to do that really, really well and really efficiently.
So this is like a stress reaction. It's a typical stress
Yeah,
reactant to
yeah,
have
yeah.
your platelets on guard. Mhm.
Yeah, so it's just
Okay.
they're just pre-priming them to say, hey, when it's ready through acetylcholine and the calcium that's there, it's going to show up and it's going to do its job really, really well. And so what that then translated to in our clinical phase was that we saw on average a 55% reduction in blood loss in our clinical trial participants. These women have VWD, so von Willebrand disease, is a bleeding disorder where it manifests for a lot of those women where they lose up to a liter of blood every time they menstruate. So think about losing a quarter of your blood every cycle. That the health detriments to that are pretty catastrophic. And so those women that bled a lot on their PBAC score, so we're talking in the like 2100s of their PBAC score, and 150 is above 150 on your PBAC score is abnormal. So these people are in,
More than 10 times the
more than
normal.
10 times that. Yeah, for sure. Thank you for helping me with that math in the moment. So some of those women saw up to a 70% reduction in blood loss. And so the other half of that cohort were women with HMB, idiopathic heavy menstrual bleeding. So no known cause as to why they're heavy menstrual bleeding. But they saw, they could see anywhere from, 30 to 60%. But on average across those two cohorts, we saw a 55% reduction in blood loss, which
So
then
I just want to
translated. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just curious. So, on idiopathic heavy menstrual bleeding, understanding this mechanism of action, what about people who actually have a cause?
Yeah.
Endometriosis, adenomyosis, fibroids, something structural.
Yeah.
Would this type of device and mechanism also help for something like that?
Yeah. The answer is we don't know yet. Those
Okay.
are on our path forward. And so we have plans for a pivotal trial that would possibly include some of those use cases. And that is on our roadmap for our clinical team. And we're very committed to understanding how these mechanisms of action. And while we can't say that we do that in this moment, and we would encourage anybody to speak to their doctor before starting any
Sure.
treatment, ours or anything else,
Yes.
we do know that our device does help alleviate the symptoms associated with endometriosis, PCOS, fibroids, and literally just like name every condition that's associated with heavy menstrual bleeding. And so for the purposes of our initial phase 1 clinical trial, we excluded people who were clinically diagnosed because, again, we wanted to understand the basic mechanisms of action then apply. So that's the first side of what we do. So all those symptoms reductions that you listed, the gastric upset, the anxiety, the sleeplessness, the cravings. The other side of that, what OhmBody does is by stimulating both the trigeminal and vagus nerve. So your trigeminal nerve is associated with pain management. So by stimulating both of those, we're actually able to balance the autonomic nervous system. So a lot of women don't understand that part of the reason you feel like crap during your period is because your autonomic nervous system is out of whack, right? Your body is in stress because your body's trying to manage what's happening inside of you during menstruation, right? Sending
And
all
just
these
so people who,
resources.
if you've heard that before or just want another parallel, that's the system that is involved when you have a hot flash. The autonomic nervous system is out of whack.
Yeah, absolutely. And so your autonomic nervous system, for those that don't know, are made up of two sides: your parasympathetic side, which is your rest and relax side, and your sympathetic side, which is your stress side. It's your survival mode. Your body is designed to do that. It
Fight
needs
or
to be in
flight.
balance, fight or flight. It needs to do that in order to create a balance for you. But during menstruation, that balance becomes really severe. You're truly, truly in fight or flight because your body's trying to manage, again, something that's happening to you that, while we don't think about it as trauma, if you were, I say this a lot, if you were bleeding as much from any other part of your body at any given point as some women do during menstruation, you'd be in the hospital, right? You'd be receiving care. But we don't look at it that way, right? Because we're like, oh, well, women do it
Right.
every month, so it must just be normal. And I'm like, oh, I'm not sure we know that that's not true, right? So by balancing out and raising your parasympathetic tones, what we're able to do is tell your body, like, hey, you've got this. We're not keeping you from menstruating. We're not keeping you from ovulating. We're not keeping your body from doing what it naturally needs to do. We're just giving your body the resources to be able to do that more in a balanced state. So it reduces cramping and reduces cravings, reduces anxiety, sleeplessness. So all of these things that really make menstruation almost unbearable for some women, in terms of just like,
Yeah.
it's not even about the bleeding for some women, it's about all the other symptoms that come along with it. So we're able to balance that. So if you take those two things, in our clinical studies, we had some women who had high responses to the blood reduction mechanism, right? So they saw a great reduction in blood loss, but maybe a moderate cramping reduction. Maybe their cramping wasn't as bad. And then some of opposite. Some had a significant reduction in cramping and all of these other symptoms, but a moderate blood loss because they were closer to what should be average and normal. But across the board, what we saw in all of our clinical participants was an increased quality of life score, which at the end of the day is really what it's about, right? OhmBody exists. Our tagline is because life doesn't stop when you start. And we truly believe that as women, for so long, we have been told you're just going to have to deal with it in your life.
Yeah.
You're going to have to figure out a way to make life happen. And we just think women deserve better than that.
So here's today's hot flash. Although this varies from person to person, the average amount of blood loss per cycle is 5 to 80 milliliters. 80 milliliters is 6 tablespoons of fluid. That's a lot of blood.
This is so exciting, and it's a very
Yeah.
different application.
Mhm.
It's a very
100%.
different part of the body to apply a wearable to.
Yeah.
Where are you in the commercialization? Obviously, people
Yep.
are wearing them. How do you get it? How much does it cost? Does
Yeah.
insurance cover it? All those
Yeah.
Yep.
important things that people want to know. If they're listening to this, whether they're physicians and don't know about this, or patients who also happen to be entrepreneurs and have other reasons for
Yeah.
listening to this, that
A
say,
woman,
she's
period. Just
talking
plug it
about
in.
me.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've been on market for about 3 weeks now, which is really exciting.
Wow.
Yeah, we're
Brand new.
very fresh and brand new. Our starter kit starts right now, it's at 720, and that includes your device, your cable, 7 disposable earpieces, because they are one-time use, just from like efficacy standpoint and just cleanliness standpoint. So those are one-time disposables. So $720. They have our active earpiece. So our active earpiece is designed for 24-hour wear. So if you live in a highly humid area, you know that you're going to be active while you're wearing it, you know that I need support longer than 2 hours, then that's the earpiece that we would recommend. We do have some coming down the pathway that'll change that a little bit, but for right now, 720 is our starter kit. While we are not covered by insurance, we are FSA, HSA eligible, so you can use your flex dollars to spend that. And then we have some payment plan options as well, in terms of like, the Klarna and those types of things. Right now, you can find us on our website, ohmbody.com, OhmBody.com, and to buy directly from us. We are exploring other avenues of retail that's really exciting. I think what's interesting about the insurance, and we talk about this a lot, is we want to, for as long as possible, avoid having to create an additional layer for a practitioner to have to prescribe this device to somebody.
Yeah.
We know that millions of women live in areas of a medical desert. They don't have quality OB-GYNs that they can go to, or their OB-GYNs are, while well-meaning, very slow to accept new tech that could be really transformational. And currently we are a wellness device and not FDA approved. That track is continuing, and we are pursuing FDA approval for sure, but we always want to stay as much as we can in the over-the-counter space. So we, again, never want to create yet another hurdle to therapy for women, because those hurdles exist everywhere, and we'd like to
No,
not contribute to that.
yeah, no, 100%. And listen, I'm lucky. I practice in a medically dense area, so
Yeah.
access, other than insurance, of course, is not an issue. But I have to be honest, as an HCP and practice for a pretty long time,
Yeah.
I didn't understand this product and its mechanism of action until you explained it or
Yeah.
until I read about it. So when people are told to discuss this with their HCP, are you educating HCPs
Yeah.
so that they'll have an understanding about this and at least have some knowledge that it's an option?
Yeah, so that's for sure a part of our go-to-market plan. And we are very thankful to the OB-GYNs who have spoken with us. We have a research medical advisory board that has an OB-GYN and a hematologist who sit on it. So we're spreading the word. I think what we're learning is when you go to market quickly and you're building a brand at the same time, it just
Yeah.
takes a lot of time to do
Sure.
that. And so while we're so grateful, we need to be on the market, and this is a technology that can help women today. And I think every
Yeah.
woman I speak to is like, okay, how do I order that? And that's amazing. It really is about sitting on podcasts like this, where OB-GYNs are listening,
Yeah.
attending conferences. I go to a lot of conferences. I sit on panels, and so it's this slow build of the brand. I do think that we're gaining some traction in ways that feel really exciting. But from the person whose job it is to ensure that those conversations are happening, it's a lot, and we're excited for the increased interest. But I think, it's a balance for us of like, how do we reach as many people as possible, tell as many doctors as possible, but also understand, a traditional OB-GYN's office is seeing a limited number of patients as
Yeah.
opposed to a telehealth option or a AI telehealth based, women's only platform. And so it's about balancing that right now. We're also, as most brands are, trying to understand where we fit in with influencers and with content creators and how do we tell this story, right? So this is a very personal, real thing, right? And there's a lot of stigma around menstrual bleeding still. There's a lot of stigma around that conversation. So not only just educating people about who we are and what we do, we also want to be a part of educating and being a part of the growth or the movement around destigmatizing menstrual health and menstrual care conversations. Just to begin with, I said on a podcast a couple weeks ago, and the host was like, we're going to talk about that time of the month, and I was like, oh, let's just call it what it is. It's just menstruation. Like, let's be really, really frank about that.
We don't tiptoe here.
Yeah, for sure. And she's so sweet, and but an older generation who grew up in a time where that kind of conversation was really challenging, and and sort of this taboo. And so I think that's the other part of our brand that I'm really proud of is Spark Biomedical could have said, we're releasing a device and this is what it does and here. And what our founders really realized was like, oh, this is a topic we want to be a part of. This is a movement we want to be a part of. So let's establish a brand that could go out there and be a voice of change. And then we happen to also have this device that we think can revolutionize the way women experience their
Right, but it all starts with the conversation.
Absolutely.
And I've been in the space from a business perspective, always had the thesis that unless you have the language and the understanding and the education, you can't have a conversation. And I don't mean medical training like Alyssa has. Alyssa has to start those conversations
Just
and has to understand them.
to make it
I
visual.
have two big questions.
Sure.
One is you talked about it comes with 7 disposable pieces. So I'm assuming the business model is disposable, that there's a monthly fee to replace them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we have a subscription model. You can buy the earpieces in 3, 7, or 10 packs, and that's customized because we know every woman menstruates differently and their journey is a lot different. So again, I shared earlier, I use maybe 3 earpieces a month, usually 2, but maybe 3. We do recognize that some women bleed for 10 days. The full 10 days, and they need support for all 10 days. And so there's an option for that. So you can pre-buy in kind of a bulk package, or you can just set up for a recurring subscription. But yes,
and the other piece is it is a high ticket item. I'm not suggesting that there's not value there, but one of the things we see is there's so many devices in women's health that are helpful and they're not covered, and there's no code, and there's really, no path to get them covered. So there are lots of people who cannot afford this device, sort of what say you to them? Is there, you mentioned payment plans, but this doesn't discriminate whether you have disposable income or not. So how are you talking to to patients who might not be able to afford this?
To your point, because I was going to ask, I'm sure that if we added up the amount of money people are either spending on medication in an effort to diminish their menstrual bleeding, or just pads and tampon use, that there may be some, real equilibration in the pricing. I don't know, but I'm sure you have figured that out. How does that work out?
And I will just say that I want to hear the numbers, but that
Yeah.
is a new thought for a
Yeah.
consumer.
Yeah, absolutely.
I speak to people in a lot of different categories. When, women are running in for Botox, but they can't afford something else essential, people are making
Yeah.
trade-offs all the time.
Yeah.
So, several years ago in marketing, everything was created with, well, just give up one Starbucks latte a week.
Yeah.
So one, I'm really interested in Alyssa's question. What is the average cost of a
Yep.
heavy menstrual bleeder who's experiencing pain over the cost of a year? And is that message, if you've tried it, resonating with consumers because it's a new idea?
Yeah, so I think you're spot on, and that's exactly how we're approaching it. And I don't have those numbers right in front of me. I'm so sorry. We have those numbers.
Of
I just don't
course.
have them in front
That's
of me. But
okay.
yes, so what we're really looking at is exactly what you talked about, Alyssa, is this idea that women right now, if we were to stop and think about all the things that you're using, not just menstrual products, so right, pads, tampons. I use a disc, so it's like a one-time purchase, and so it's kind of
Replacing your
throwaway
underwear
thought.
that gets ruined during
Right.
your
Okay. So
period.
that's what I was going to say. It's how many times have you thrown away a pair of expensive underwear in a restaurant because you're like, oh shit, that's not salvageable for me. Thrown away a pair of pants. Had to have your
Yep.
car,
Or car,
car,
cleaned.
couch, whatever it is,
Dry
cleaned,
cleaning.
dry cleaning. So that part, but heating pads, over-the-counter medication. When you think about an ablation, right? The cost of an ablation is anywhere between $2,000 to $5,000, depending on what your insurance coverage is. And that's not even permanent, right? I mean, an ablation is not typically permanent. Hysterectomy costs, the cost of undergoing surgery in that way.
Yeah.
So as we look at those types of things, that's how we want to position it too. We recognize that the device is pricier. And while we continue to evaluate COGS consistently, our suppliers, where that looks, it doesn't go unnoticed to us that we are expensive. And if I could just give this device away, I would do that because I think it is that revolutionary. We have this incredible woman who has shared her story. She has VWD and was one of our first clinical patients. And after I listened to her stories, I was in tears. And I literally thought to myself, if she's the only woman we helped, this device was worth creating. All the millions of dollars of research, all the time, all the effort. If she's the only woman we helped on the planet, it was worth it. Like truly, we understand that it is life-changing. But to your point, the things we excuse as women, right? Girl math, I think is what we call it, right? This idea of like, oh, it's just this much, it's just this much. But when you sit down and really think about how much you're paying to manage something that happens to you monthly, that you have no control over, you can't stop from happening. Well, for the most part, you can't stop from happening. You can obviously IUDs and ablations, but and when we add up those costs, and for women who have been suffering for years in this, finding doctors who don't listen to them, going to yet another doctor who doesn't listen to them, acupuncture, holistic medicine. I mean, truly, if you add all of that up, the investment of what an OhmBody is pretty small in comparison.
Right. And that's just marketing and education to get people to reframe it.
Yep, absolutely.
Well, I was going to also mention the maybe younger or millennial and younger population to really have the environment and sustainability angles fresh and top of mind. This is also important. Very, very interesting. Don't forget all the PMS products that people are using, including prescription medication or herbal supplements that, might be helped. But it does seem to promise so much relief. So it's super interesting.
Yeah. And
one of the things, and I'm sure you've thought about this, I'm curious if there's anything you could share, is it strikes me that this technology could be applicable to other conditions. So you had mentioned the patents early on, so you're well protected in that way. Are you at liberty to share what's the next beachhead that you're going after, that this technology using the same interaction with the nerves could be beneficial for?
Yeah, I think some of the spaces from the Spark biomedical side is like cognitive sustainability. Like, are we able to help manage the functionality of the brain through long periods of stress, whether that's looking at a computer screen?
Who wouldn't buy that? Anybody with an aging parent would.
Amen, right? So that's really exciting. From the side of heavy menstrual bleeding, though, I think we talked about earlier, those other indications. What impact could we really have around endometriosis? What impact could we have for PMDD? What impact can we have for adolescent HMB, right? So I have a college roommate who started her period at 8. at the age of 8
Yeah.
on a class trip with a male teacher. She literally thought she was dying, right? And she suffered from heavy menstrual bleeding all throughout her adolescence. And birth control was not an option for her because she was the daughter of a Southern Baptist preacher from Mississippi. And they felt that that would lead to promiscuity. And like, that's a real thing that young girls are living through every day. So can we provide relief in that? Can we help set the body up for success so that if and when they're ready for, for a family planning, fertility, now we haven't introduced synthetic hormones into their body prior to their body really being ready for any sort of support in that way.
I'm going to mention that you started off this conversation telling us about working in sports and athletics.
Yeah.
And of course, with just such highlighted women's sports teams now, guess who really has no time for menstruation,
100%.
much less heavy menstruation, much less all those PMS symptoms. So I can see how these paths have crossed.
Yeah,
So,
we're really excited about that for sure. I have a dream. I always say this whenever people listen, so maybe one of your listeners can help us do this, but I have a dream of having an OhmBody lounge at the 2028 LA Olympics. So if anybody wants to help us make that happen, please, please come help us. But yes, you're right. Sport actually is one of our focused areas of marketing in the space. And luckily with my background, I've been privileged enough to have some really great inroads into that. And we have some exciting things coming down the pipe.
That's really exciting. And in
that would
women's
be
health from the
valuable.
business side, partnerships are the thing.
Yes, absolutely. And I spend a lot of time talking about partnerships. So if any of your listeners want to talk about partnerships, they can reach out.
Well, this is so exciting.
Fascinating.
And your
Fascinating.
enthusiasm and your knowledge and the, the really thoughtful way that you explain what you're trying to do, I'm sure is helping people understand the message and look at this as a solution. So 3 weeks in, we'll be watching you. We'll look forward to
Absolutely.
catching up again in 3 months and in a year and 3 years. I did have another question from a treatment perspective, and I think I know the answer, but I'm just going to throw it out there anyway.
Okay.
If you use this regularly, is there any long-term benefit that it reduces the baseline level of pain that you might experience?
TBD. That's all I can say in this moment. It's TBD. We are, again, our clinical trials continue to grow, and we've got several in the pipeline.
I love a cryptic.
Yeah, so we're TBD on that. But I will say this, and I think this is really important, is that with the first use of OhmBody, most users feel relief and care. And I think that's a lot to be said in that. There's a lot of devices out there.
So right now it's treatment, but not preventative, but that's something that you're looking at.
Yeah. And
But
so
think about it too. If you don't anticipate such discomfort because you've had a good experience 1 month, that's going to carry over month after month after month in terms of your nervous system, because you won't be having such anticipatory anxiety. So I think that's fascinating. And what a great question, Rachel.
Yeah.
And the other thing that we see talking, not just in this category, but others, is as you started to describe all the accommodations that people might make and products they might use, any condition in women's health has so many far-reaching impacts on everything, on your day-to-day, on your productivity, on your energy, on your sleep. And that's one of my favorite things about Alyssa. Whatever we're talking about, whatever condition, she talks about, the fundamentals: sleep, hydration, nutrition, and exercise. So I just love that. Well, we will be watching you. We're so excited. And
thank you.
Keep us posted, and
Please.
hope to talk again soon.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
It's our pleasure. Thank you, Amy.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye.
Don't forget, subscribe to our podcast at businessofthev.com for the latest trends and trendsetters in women's health and business.